In this week's episode of Breakthrough Expert TV, with Game of Thrones returning to our screens once again, I thought it's a great time to share with you some of the phobias featured within it and that some of the actors have, and how to go about solving it if you have these similar fears. Hi, I'm Christopher Paul Jones, the Breakthrough Expert. So why am I talking about Game of Thrones and phobias today? Very simple, clickbait. But back to it, the main reason is because I'm actually a huge fan. Now there will be a few Game of Thrones spoilers in this episode for the fans, so if you haven't seen all the way up to season 6, you might want to skip this video and watch another one of mine, of course. In a universe where people watch their dad die, brother die, and their pet die, all sorts of bizarre and terrible things go on, most of which I can't really talk about on a family-orientated channel. But let's just say it's such a scary, traumatic world. It's amazing that not every single character in it has a phobia, an anxiety, or some form of major trauma. But let me start with the series itself, and let me talk about one of the characters that does. Now, what I love about this character is he is a triple hard badass. His name is Gregory Gagain, better known as the Hound.
You're not a good listener.
Now, this character cuts through people, is fearless, swears a lot, kind of likable in his own way, but also very brutal. And yet he's fought all these wars, he's taken on all these challenges. But when he sees fire, he completely switches. Now, firstly, what I love about this is the way the series introduced it. Now, I haven't read the books, so surely book readers out there can correct me on actually how it's done. But in the TV show, it was started in, I think, season 1, where Littlefinger tells one of the girls about the Hound and how he got his scar.
Gregor found his little brother playing with a toy by the fire. Gregor's toy. A wooden knight. Gregor never said a word. He just grabbed his brother by the scruff of his neck and shoved his face into the burning coals.
Later on, we see, in a battle, when Stannis was trying to take King's Landing, the guy turns up on fire, and suddenly the Hound just packs it all in. It was a lost battle, but he didn't care. But the second he saw that, he left the battlefield and just gave up and started wandering the wilderness. And then later on, after fighting Beric Dondarrion with a flaming sword, you can see the shock on his face. And finally, Arya figures it out and says, I know you're phobic of fire, and I know why.
I knew fear when I saw it in you. You're afraid of fire. When Beric's sword went up in flames, you looked like a scared little girl. And I know why too.
If you've had a severe traumatic event like that, it's quite normal to create that level of trauma. So can you be that tough, that strong, and that fearless and still have a phobia? The answer is yes, and especially a phobia like that, but it doesn't have to be. I've worked with all sorts of very tough guys, martial arts experts and military men and special forces people that have done all sorts of things that I would think would be terrifying and traumatic that don't seem to have affected them. Yet they can still, on the other hand, have phobias of the bizarrest kind. And that's really because phobias are not based on logic. Now, going back to this character, it's very obvious, the root cause, and it's a very strong one. Now, most people's phobias, luckily, are nowhere near that dramatic, for the most part. And they can be created just by watching your parents react, or watching a movie with something happening, or reading an article, just to create that seed. So while most people don't necessarily consciously always know what caused it, subconsciously, everything is in there. And that's why hypnotic type skills that can bring up those memories, where you can find it, work with them in such a way as to let them go, are very, very useful. So what would I do if this character was to come see me? Well, first, I'd be terrified. And secondly, I'd go, I'm sorry, who let you in my office with the armor and that big scary sword? Security? But once we'd ironed all that out and started over again, what would I do? Among other techniques, I would use techniques for taking out trauma, such as what's called havening or EMDR, those kind of processes, as well as scrambling techniques. But the first thing I would do is get him to create a place of safety.
Safety? Where the fuck's that?
Right now, his subconscious believes that it's that pattern recognition system that sees fire and goes, react. I have that memory, that childhood memory is kicking in, so avoid. And so firstly, we need to re-educate his subconscious to feel safe, not walk towards the fire, but not become terrified just because he sees a bonfire. So that would be the first step. In part 2, we'll look at some of the actors from Game of Thrones that have phobias and how to go about treating those fears. Please remember to like and subscribe.